Chapter 15. Famous People. The earliest and most famous Australians is Ned Kelly. Together with his brother and two other men, Kelly robbed banks in the 1870s. Kelly and his friends wore armor which they made themselves, and they soon became famous all over Australia. Kelly was finally caught and killed in 1880, when he was just 25. A famous group of paintings by Sir Sidney Nolan shows Ned Kelly and his men. Australia has had a lot of sports stars too. In tennis, Rod Laver won 4 times in the 1960s at Wimbledon in London, where international tennis stars play every year to find the best players in the world. Pat Cash won there once, and Margaret Court won 3 times between 1963 and 1970. Yvonne Goolagong won at Wimbledon in 1971, and then again in 1980, and was perhaps the first Aborigine to be famous through sport. The young player Hayden Hewitt was the number 1 men's player in the world in 2001 at the age of 20 and won at Wimbledon in 2002. As well as Ian Thorpe, Australia has had other swimming stars. One of them was Shane Gould, who won 3 Olympic gold medals at the age of 15. In cricket, Steve Waugh and Shane Warne are names that are known in Australia and the rest of the world. But one of the most popular sports people of recent years was the Aboriginal runner Cathy Freeman. Cathy won the 400 meters race at the Sydney Olympics in 2000, and Australians of all kinds and colors were excited by her success. Kerry Packer, a businessman who owned newspapers, television stations, and a lot of land, was possibly the richest person in Australia when he died in 2005. International businessman Rupert Murdoch started The Australian, the first daily newspaper for all Australia, in 1964, and now has businesses in Australia, the USA, Great Britain, and Hong Kong. Patrick White wrote Tree of Man and Voss, and won the Nobel Prize in 1973. Thomas Keneally's book Schindler's Ark later became the successful film Schindler's List. Other popular Australian writers are Peter Carey, Germaine Greer, and Robert Hughes. The star, Mel Gibson, is famous for the Lethal Weapon and Mad Max films, and Braveheart, and more recently The Passion of the Christ. But now, Russell Crowe is Australia's biggest film star, after he won an Oscar for Gladiator, though Crowe was in fact born in New Zealand. Nicole Kidman and Cate Blanchett have both had international success. In 2006, Kidman was the highest paid woman in films, and at the top of the list of singers must be Kylie Minogue. She began on television, but is now known all over the world as a singer and dancer. Finally, among Australians, there are 2 very unusual people. Steve Irwin grew up working with crocodiles and other animals. Later, he appeared on television and made films about wild animals in Australia and other countries. Sadly, he died in an accident while making a film at the Great Barrier Reef in 2006. An international television star, Edna Everage, with her extraordinary clothes, purple hair, and fantastic sunglasses, could only come from Australia. Dame Edna has appeared on television shows since the 1960s, and she even has a street named after her, Dame Edna Place, in Melbourne. In fact, Dame Edna is really a man called Barry Humphries. Who is the most famous New Zealander of all? In the 20th century, the answer was probably Sir Edmund Hillary. On the 29th of May, 1953, Hillary stood on top of Mount Everest with a Nepalese climber, Tenzin Norgay, the first people in the world to do so. Later, Hillary returned to Nepal to work with the people of Nepal, and he helped to build schools and hospitals there. Bill Hamilton loved cars, boats and engines, and he wanted a boat that could travel fast on the shallow rivers of the South Island. So he invented the Hamilton jet boat. In 1960, 4 of these boats traveled 160 kilometers up the Colorado River in the USA, and soon people were buying jet boats all over the world. New Zealand has its sports stars too. In the 1960s, Arthur Lydiard began teaching young runners. 2 of them, Peter Snell and Murray Hallberg, went on to win gold medals in the Olympics. Bruce McLaren had international success as a racing car driver in the 1960s, and McLaren drivers have continued to win prizes since then. Every New Zealander can tell you stories about their favorite All Black, but one that everybody knows is Jonah Lomu. Tall, 1.96 meters, heavy, 119 kilos, fast and strong, Lomu played 73 times for the All Blacks between 1994 and 2002, and many people think that he was the first international rugby star. Sailor Sir Peter Blake was another favorite sportsman. He won the Whitbread Round the World Race in 1989 and then managed the New Zealand Sailors that won the America's Cup twice. Sadly, he was murdered while sailing on the Amazon in 2001. Some other 20th century New Zealanders are Sir Peter Buck, Te Rangi Hiroa, who was the first Maori doctor and who studied the Maori way of life, Ernest Rutherford, who won the Nobel Prize for his scientific work, and Catherine Mansfield, who wrote excellent short stories. Dame Kiri Te Kanawa became famous as a singer and sang at the wedding of Prince Charles and Diana, Princess of Wales, in St. Paul's Cathedral, London. Perhaps the most famous New Zealander today is Peter Jackson. Jackson loved films as a child and began making them while still young. In the late 1990s, he started work on the 3 films of The Lord of the Rings, and they were enormously successful. The 3 films together won 17 Oscars. Jackson then made a new film of King Kong, which was also very successful. Although he is famous, Jackson still lives and works in New Zealand, and the 3 Lord of the Rings films were first shown there. He also has a small part in all of his films. In King Kong, he tries to shoot the animal from a plane.